Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, Vince Coglianese.
Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 3:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news on a heck of a Friday for a lot of news. Coming up, Sean Davis will be with us. He's the CEO and co-founder of The Federalist to react to that gigantic Oval Office meeting that just took place between Volodymyr Zelensky and President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. A lot to get into right there. Zelensky was just asked to leave the White House. No deal signed. I'll explain why in just a moment. David Strom from Hot Air at 4 o'clock. And then at 5 o'clock, the great E.J. Antoni, the economist from the Heritage Foundation, the in-house economist of this show. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. You cannot understand the Volodymyr Zelensky, President Trump Oval Office meeting right now if you only hear the part where J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are beating this guy into a pulp. If that's the only part you hear, you're missing the starting context for this. Even before the meeting began today, Volodymyr Zelensky has, over the course of just the last few weeks, insulted the United States over and over and over again. In fact, Mark Caputo is a reporter with Axios. He's got a great piece this week on the subject, and he calls it Zelensky's 5 moves that set off Trump over the course of just the last, really, 2 weeks, not even. 6 administration officials talked to Axios a couple days ago. There were 5 incidents that angered Trump: Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Mike Waltz. Taken all together, one administration official said, Zelensky, quote, showed how not to do the art of the deal when it came to courting Trump's support. On February 12th, this is the start of these 5 events, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he goes to meet with Zelensky in Kiev to offer a proposal that gives the United States access to Ukrainian mineral rights. That's in return for U.S. protection. Trump later told reporters Zelensky was rude and delayed his meeting with Bessent because he slept in. He showed up late to the meeting with the country that has been completely paying for all of this ongoing war in Ukraine. February 14th, then, 2 days later, the Munich Security Conference. This is where J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio meet with Zelensky. They're trying to get his approval at that time for the mineral rights deal. But the officials at the time said Zelensky surprised the Americans by saying, sorry, out of his hands, it's up to Parliament. I can't do anything about it. February 15th, Zelensky now publicly rejects this offer. And the White House people are noted that his remarks to reporters that the, quote, deal was not in the interests of a sovereign Ukraine were markedly different from the more positive-sounding comments that he had even made on X the day before. So, once again, staring a gift horse in the mouth here. February 18th, Rubio and Waltz and then the presidential envoy, Steve Witkoff, they sit down with Russian negotiators in Saudi Arabia. Zelensky lashes out at them for having that meeting, saying, we should have been at that meeting. We should have been, meaning Ukraine. And that's when President Trump reacted at Mar-a-Lago. And that's when he said, hey, Zelensky started all this, and he's got a terrible approval rating. Who is he? February 19th, then. Subsequently, Zelensky then attacks President Trump, saying that he, quote, lives in a disinformation space. President Trump responded that Zelensky was a modestly successful comedian that had become a dictator without elections. You know, they aren't having elections. They haven't had elections for some time in Ukraine. It's long overdue. It's time to get back to that. They should have an election. Let the Ukrainian people decide if they want this kind of leadership. And that brings us to today. That brings us to this Oval Office meeting. I want to play for you as much as I can the full context of this audio. This is the audio begins as President Trump is talking about how obviously both sides of this equation, Ukraine and Russia, just absolutely hate each other and how difficult it is to even achieve a deal. And then it leads into Zelensky patronizing Vice President J.D. Vance for seeking a diplomatic end to the war, and then implying that President Trump had somehow failed Ukraine by not riding into the country over the 2014 invasion of Crimea during the Obama era Take a listen as this thing becomes a complete disaster thanks to Zelensky's behavior in the Oval Office today. Zelensky dressed in a long-sleeve T-shirt and tactical pants, sitting next to the fireplace in the Oval Office.
This thing over with. You see the hatred he's got for Putin. It's very tough for me to make a deal with that kind of hate. He's got tremendous hatred. And I understand that, but I can tell you the other side isn't exactly in love with, him either. So it's not a question of alignment. I'm aligned with the world. I want to get the thing set. I'm aligned with Europe. I want to see if we can get this thing done. You want me to be tough? I could be tougher than any human being you've ever seen. I'd be so tough. But you're never going to get a deal that way, so that's the way it goes. All right, one more question.
Hey, I want to respond to this. So look, for 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden of thumping our chest and pretending that the President of the United States' words mattered more than the President of the United States' actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump.
All right, so J.D. Vance laying out a really good argument here, which is saying the Biden-era stuff didn't work. You know what the United States did? It turned Ukrainians into cannon fodder under this idea that we were going to somehow weaken Russia. Of course, that didn't actually occur. Russia has come out stronger as a result of all of this, and there are millions of casualties in that awful war. This strategy isn't working, J.D. Vance says, correctly. And here's where Vladimir Zelensky tries to jump in.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied our parts, big parts of Ukraine, part of East and Crimea. So he occupied it on 2014. So during a lot of years, so I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014, nobody stopped him. He just occupied and took. He killed people. You know what the contact line?
2015.
2014.
2014 and 2014.
2014.
Yeah. So
I was not here.
Yeah, but
that's exactly right.
Yes, but during 2014 till 2022, the situation the same. The people have been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped him. You know that we had conversations with him, a lot of conversation, my bilateral conversation, and we signed with him, me, like a new president. In 2019, I signed with him the deal. I signed with him, Macron and Merkel, we signed ceasefire. Ceasefire, all of them told me that he will never go. We signed him with gas contract. Yes, but after that, he broken this ceasefire. He killed our people, and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy?
So Zelensky's saying, Trump said, you abandoned us, he's saying to Trump. He's saying that in the wake of the invasion of Crimea and the ensuing chaos from that, you abandoned us. The word from the president, President Trump, throughout all of this has been actually, Putin only invades when I'm not in office. That has been the pattern. Putin did not invade during the Trump era, Trump 45. And now President Trump's trying to clean up the mess of the Biden era.
JD, you are speaking about. What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring it into this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Count once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate.
This is, by the way, Zelensky's, to the extent that he's trying to make a point here, he's saying something like, if Russia is able to conquer Ukraine, it's going to move on, it's going to cross the ocean and attack America. This is psychotic. This is completely psychotic. There's no, what he's saying bears no resemblance to anything. It's not, there's no reality here. He's merely trying to engage in a form of moral blackmail to say, you better be supporting this or else your country's next. It's so crazy. What is he doing? And during this whole sequence, I should point out that the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States is a woman. She's got her face in her hands in the Oval Office. She can't even look anymore as Zelensky does this.
What we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's back to you, far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save.
Zelensky goes, what are you talking about? I can't. He's saying, pretending he didn't campaign. He did. He went in October to Pennsylvania, claiming that he was just looking at arms manufacturing in Pennsylvania. He was there right as the election was about to occur in order to support Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to try and prevent President Trump from coming back to office. That was Zelensky trying to interfere in the American election. J.D. Vance calling him out to his face, and he's pretending like, me? What? Pennsylvania?
Save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you can...
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country's in big trouble.
Can I answer?
Wait a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
you haven't been
this
alone.
Cabinet.
You haven't been alone.
In this cabinet.
We gave you, through this stupid president, $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and your men are brave, but they had to use our military. If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe less.
In 2 weeks. Of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
Again,
I tell you.
Just say thank you.
I said a lot of times to American people.
Accept that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media.
You know, what JD's also pointing out, you heard him say it here and you heard him at the beginning. He said, what are you doing? Why are you doing this in front of the cameras? We're supposed to, the whole point was they would invite the press in and they'd answer a couple of questions. That was the goal. And Zelensky turned it into this finger-wagging, patronizing, ungrateful display that blew up the entire conversation. President Trump today, the whole point was to have a conversation about how can we help sustain Ukraine to the extent that we should be involved there at all, in exchange for getting something back for all of the support we've already given, which is in the form of this mineral rights deal that was supposed to be signed today. This whole thing is falling apart. And JD points out we're supposed to be engaged in a meaningful diplomatic conversation right now, one-on-one, behind closed doors, not in front of the press. But you decided to make this a big deal. Okay, fine, we'll do it here.
When you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on.
I understand, sir.
I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards. You're buried there. Your people are dying. You're running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running low on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I wanted this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
With guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me.
For you what
that wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden who was not a smart person. That was with Obama.
It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
One more question to Mr. Vice President. I'm sorry.
It's going to be a tough deal to make because the attitudes have to change.
What if Russia breaks ceasefire?
All right, so President Trump, right out of this, there was no lunch. They were supposed to have a lunch together. Yeah, no. President Trump said it's time for Zelensky to go. Zelensky was ushered out of the White House, packed into his car, and sent on his way. Now, he is supposed to do a number of interviews this afternoon, including on Fox News with Bret Baier. Look forward to seeing what he says there. He's tried to salvage things now on X. He posted to X the words "thank you" a bunch of times now. Now he's very grateful. Thank you, America. Thank you for your support. Thank you for this visit. Thank you, POTUS, Congress, and the American people. Ukraine needs just and lasting peace, and we're working exactly for that. That's the message from Zelensky. He screwed up big time today as he visited the White House and then insulted the president and the vice president. It's now 3:22.
WMAL, making sense of mainstream media because the double standard is real. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
Oh, man. Senator Lindsey Graham, he had an enthusiastic meeting earlier today with Vladimir Zelensky, but after Zelensky was unceremoniously booted from the White House today, and literally White House staffers ate his lunch, the lunch he was supposed to have with President Trump, Senator Lindsey Graham is now saying that what Zelensky did was a complete and utter disaster. It was disrespectful. Quote, I don't know if we can ever do business with Zelensky again. Lindsey Graham, step it up to the microphones. Yeah, he knows who's in charge. Doesn't want to be on the wrong side of this. Hey, coming up, Sean Davis will be with us from The Federalist. We'll take your calls. A lot to discuss today on the Vince Coglianese Show.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up top of the hour, David Strom from Hot Air is with us. And then at 5 o'clock, our economist E.J. Antoni is on the schedule. And you can join us at 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. Fireworks in the Oval Office today as Volodymyr Zelensky insults the president and vice president of the United States.
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come to the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems? Bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
Oh, man, a lot going on there. Joining us now to discuss what played out today, Sean Davis, CEO and co-founder of The Federalist. Sean, good to have you back with us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so right after this meeting, President Trump dismissed Volodymyr Zelensky from the White House. He was ushered away in a motorcade. He didn't even get to eat his lunch, and no deal signed. It seems to me Zelensky really screwed this up today.
This will go down in history books as one of the most unnecessary diplomatic debacles in American history. I've never witnessed anything like it. I don't think anyone else has. For someone in Zelensky's position, who is wholly dependent upon the largesse and graciousness of the American public to remain alive and viable, to walk into our seat of government and speak to our elected officials the way he did is unconscionable. And I'm still honestly shocked at having witnessed what happened.
He made a number of really stupid moves. He goes in there, he patronizes J.D. Vance for saying he wants to see a diplomatic end to the war. He implied that President Trump failed Ukraine by not riding into the country over the 2014 invasion of Crimea under President Obama. And then he also suggested that if the United States ceases to keep sustaining the war there, that somehow we are under threat, as that it will come across our ocean to attack us. I mean, what is he even talking about?
Well, I think that's the typical threat that has been used or was used effectively over the last several years to emotionally extort America into giving money. This idea that, if you don't spend all this money in Ukraine, then Putin is going to invade Poland and then Germany and then eventually America. And the fact is, that's nonsense. And I actually interpreted that statement from him as a threat, that if you don't help me, you're going to have problems on your shores soon. And it was detestable. And God bless Donald Trump and Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance for reading him the riot act to his face and sending him packing.
I was impressed by the fact, I'm not surprised, but I like to see that it looked like President Trump and J.D. Vance are flowing together like they're doing improv jazz. Those guys are on the same page, and they just, once Zelensky started attacking them, those two went in on him together.
They did, and it was a really interesting dynamic that I'd like to compare to the previous Trump administration, where Trump would bring in neocons. He had McMaster, he had John Bolton, and he used them as foils to kind of scare his opponents or negotiating partners into coming to their senses. And it kind of worked, but it works so much better with JD because he is coming and playing the bad cop game from a position of sanity as opposed to the position of insanity of a Bolton or other neocon who's constantly saying out there, if you don't do this, we'll nuke you and whatever. The partnership that Trump and Vance have put together here is so powerful for American interests, and I think that's why everyone was so captivated in watching it, is that they were completely in sync and on the same wavelength, focused on the same goal, but embodying different roles in the negotiation. Trump clearly likes to be a gracious host. He wants to be a good faith negotiating partner. And when the person on the other side of the table is being ridiculous,
yes,
JD knows without having to get tapped in, all right, I got to go submit this idiot.
I've seen a lot of reporters that I trust, conservative reporters who talked to the White House today. They said this was not the plan. The White House did not plan on any sort of ambush of Vladimir Zelensky. They weren't trying to embarrass him. They genuinely wanted to sign a deal today. And it was Zelensky who blew this whole thing up. And the reality of the deal is, as I understand it, was that we were going to get access to some of their mineral rights in order to recoup many of the billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars that we've poured into Ukraine. And simultaneously, we were going to give them a variety of support that I am certain Vladimir Putin wasn't eager to see us help them with. I keep seeing the media saying, well, what is Putin losing here? Well, if we keep giving resources to Ukraine, that is working against Putin's interests, isn't it?
Yes, and your interpretation is correct. So I was at the White House yesterday. I was at the press briefing with Prime Minister Starmer from the UK and Trump. It was obvious in the room yesterday that Trump thought he was very close to a deal. He had a tough negotiation with Starmer. It seemed like they had agreed on a set of principles, and the mood there was one of an imminent deal. I mean, they had the tables ready to go for a victory lunch, for a deal to be signed today. They absolutely were not planning for this to go down the way it did, and it was them reacting in the moment and understanding, based on Zelensky's attitude, that he did not have any interest in a deal. All he wanted was a check.
Well, what happens now, do you think? Because now, Zelensky leaves with his tail tucked between his legs. He just posted to X a short while ago a number of thank yous to America. And he is set to do, I think, 2 interviews in the United States this afternoon that I'm aware of, including one with Bret Baier on the Fox News channel. Does this increase the likeliness that we reach a deal that may be even more in the United States' interest going forward?
I really don't know. Let's take a step back and note that these negotiations got off to a rocky start because Vance and Rubio went to Europe and they sat down with Zelensky. They thought they had a deal on mineral rights, and then he immediately left that meeting and started lying about what transpired there. So that was strike one. He shows up today in his camo pajamas. That's strike two. And then he has the audacity to lecture and interrupt the president and the vice president of the most powerful country in all of history. I think that was strike three. And if I were Zelensky right now, I would be very concerned at the prospect of Trump saying he will not negotiate with him. Yeah. When Ukraine is allowed to elect a leader democratically who wants peace, he will be happy to have discussions then and not until. And so I think that's the big open question right now, is whether Zelensky will even be a party to future peace negotiations.
I'm glad you brought that up. That was my next question about elections potentially in Ukraine. Right now, the explanation that everybody keeps giving us is that, well, they're not having elections because they declared martial law, and by a product of some combination of their constitution and their law, they can't have elections while they're in martial law, yada, yada, yada. But it is that decision is up to the government of Ukraine. If they want to back off from that, either by passing a law or ending martial law, they can do it today. They're not doing it. They're depriving their people of the ability to weigh in on the state of their affairs. What do you think happens if the Ukrainian people actually do get to have an election?
Yeah, and it's obvious why they're not holding an election, and it's because they believe that the current government would fail and would be thrown out of office. I think we all see how obvious that is. Now, I actually likened to a colleague earlier today that Ukraine, to me, looks more like the PLO, the Palestinians, than any other kind of like group of people. You look at the PLO, I don't think they've had elections since like 2005 or 2006. And the reason is that the people propping that up and the person in charge there know that if they were to have elections today, they would get someone who they really don't like dealing with as much as they do Mahmoud Abbas. Mm. And Zelensky now is in the position of being the Abbas, of being the PLO of Eastern Europe, where we all know why he's not holding in elections, and it has nothing to do with the best interests of his country.
The reaction from the left today to this exchange between President Trump and Vladimir Zelensky is predictable. Chuck Schumer was condemning it today, saying, quote, Trump and Vance are doing Putin's dirty work. Senate Democrats will never stop fighting for freedom and democracy. Meanwhile, over on CNN, Christiane Amanpour, who fancies herself an excellent diplomat, though I don't think she's ever done anything diplomatic, had this to say.
Never in the history of modern diplomacy, war, peace, whatever, have I ever seen anything like it. We just have to hope that for the safety of the free world and for the American people, for the European people, for the Ukrainian people, that these two presidents get out of breath and try to iron out their differences.
Yeah, okay, so she's very scandalized by it. She's horrified, Sean Davis. I saw a lot of that today from establishment Washington and all of these lefties. What did you make of it?
I think they are all playing the typical jersey game. Trump is wearing the red jersey. They view Zelensky as the blue jersey. And so no matter what Trump does, they're going to jeer it. It's all politics. Look, they had their own guy in office for 4 years. They had Biden there and his whole team running things. They could have gotten peace and a deal and a negotiated end of this war at any point over those 4 years. They failed. The American people recognized it, and they elected a new government. Yeah. So they're out to lunch. They know they're out to lunch, and so they're just deciding to stomp their feet and have temper tantrums rather than being part of a solution.
And J.D. Vance really got to the point today, I thought, Sean Davis, because he was really pointing out that the Biden policy was to turn the Ukrainian people into cannon fodder. It has not helped bring the war to a close. It's only strengthened Russia. Like supposedly the goal, as all of this started and the United States got involved, was, we'll use, and they don't say this out loud, but they really thought that they could do this. They'll just use Ukraine as a way to grind down Russia. That didn't happen. And now a lot of Ukrainians are dead. And President Trump is trying to bring an end to all of this awful bloodshed that he's seeing images of. He keeps talking about the bullets traveling across these open battlefields only to hit human bodies. He wants this to stop.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a lot of this attitude about, the only good Russian is a dead Russian stems from kind of Cold War era ideas about the Soviet Union and grievances going back to then. I get it. But if you look at the actual tale of the tape, Russia has never been a country that particularly cares all that much about its people. If you look at World War II, they had, 25 million casualties going against Germany. So Russia doesn't look at that and think, oh, we really lost all that much. But if you look at financially, our sanctions actually ended up strengthening the Russian currency. It didn't actually hurt Russia economically, and it had the side effect of driving Russia even more into the arms of China.
Yes.
Look, I get that people don't like Putin. I get that they don't like Russia, but the nation's not going anywhere. And if you have the opportunity, you should be looking at every country on earth as someone who's a potential partner and ally of the U.S., even if they're icky, that we can use in our battle against China, which is our real global geopolitical foe. And instead, they take these idiotic, self-defeating short-term actions that in the long term end up alienating people we could work with against our actual geopolitical enemies.
Sean Davis, CEO, co-founder of The Federalist. Thank you, sir, for your time today. Always appreciate our conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. Take care.
Oh, always. It's 3:48. All right, let's see. I've got Richard calling in from Manassas now on line 5. Hey, Richard, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Always for taking my call, Vince. This really comes down to a tale of two presidents. First, you got President Trump, who's really grown from being 45 to 47. Yeah. First 45, he was very transactional. Like Sean said, it was very kind of bold, kind of doing the whole crazy unknown guy thing, where now he actually has principles that he's standing up for. And to go over to Zelensky, why can't this guy ever buy a suit and actually show up like a professional politician instead of this cosplay warrior? He's still a comedian, and he hasn't matured any as a political figure. And to come in there, and we all know what he wants. He wants NATO membership. That's the only security condition that he wants. He doesn't want to sign a deal. He wants our soldiers on the ground. Because any deal he signs that involves NATO membership, the moment his pen lifts off the paper that involves NATO membership, he's invoking Article 5.
Yes.
Because that's what he wants. He wants my son, an infantryman at Fort Drum, New York, to fight his battle for him because his country has been so incapable of defending itself. He doesn't want an exit. He wants us to fight Russia for him.
You're right. He wants to magnet us into the war. And you're totally right. If they join NATO, that's an instant way to trigger Article 5 because they're at war. The whole thing is it's suicidal. That would be. And you're right on President Trump, too. President Trump is definitely a changed man from 45 to 47. I think in 45, he was kind of feeling his way through the presidency. He was trying a lot of different strategies, kind of the team of rivals worldview. He brings in the John Boltons, as Sean was talking about, tries to get people guessing as to what he's up to. But in this presidency, I think we've all noticed, he has an intensity, a focus, a determination, and a calm that didn't exist in the first presidency to the same extent. And it is serving him very well. This has been a short 47th presidency so far, but it's been an effective and efficient one. And today, I think he reflected well in the Oval Office.
Can I make one more quick point?
Yeah.
Is that what Zelensky doesn't understand is the mineral rights deal puts American civilians into Ukraine, which makes Russia have to think twice. It makes Ukraine the cactus to where he has to be very careful where he attacks because he doesn't want to kill American civilians.
Interesting. Because
then that makes Russia the bad guy.
Yeah. Richard, thank you. I like the analogy is interesting. Cactus. I haven't heard that before. I like that one. Thank you for that. Let me give Ann in Alexandria a moment here. Line 7. Ann, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Thanks, Vince. And I wanted to say, let me start out by saying I've taught negotiation for over 40 years. And what we witnessed today was the president schooling Zelensky in negotiation. Zelensky believed his own publicity, and we now know that Biden supposedly arranged for him to get Time Man of the Year, and all the American media built him up into this fantasy figure, and the worldwide media did the same. And the guy believed his own publicity, came in there acting like he's the big man on campus.
Yeah.
Well, he got slapped down, and Trump used the strongest thing you can in negotiation. It's called walkaway power. And there's no walking away from it. So once Trump invoked that, Zelensky now is going to have to come back on hands and knees and have his head right for Trump to get back in the game.
Walkaway power. Anyone who's ever bought a car knows the value of walkaway power. That's the key. Yeah, not today. I can't do this deal.
Right.
Then they come chasing after you. Wait, I've got something else. Yeah, thank you, Ann. That's a really, really smart point. And yes, I left impressed by the whole thing. I mean, what is Zelensky to do but to come back to that table and to put the United States in a better situation here, or to be replaced by his own people? Maybe if they have an election like Sean Davis was talking about. We'll see what happens. President Trump has been entrusted by the American people to navigate this, and you saw what that looked like today. Coming up, David Strom from Hot Air will be with us at 4, EJ Antoni at 5, and of course, your calls continue, 888-630-9625.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.